I think that was my first episode that was mine, that I could really, it was difficult for me because they didn't really know how deep I was as an actress, how much I could do.
The story of Melissa Sue Anderson and her departure from Little House on the Prairie is one that has fascinated fans for many years. For viewers who grew up watching the beloved television series, Melissa was more than just an actress. She was Mary Ingalls, the quiet and thoughtful older sister in the Ingalls family. Her character carried some of the most emotional moments of the show, and her performances often left audiences deeply moved. When the series first aired in 1974, it quickly became one of the most loved family dramas on television. Created and led by Michael Landon, the show told the story of a pioneer family living in the small town of Walnut Grove in the late 19th century. The program was known for heartfelt storytelling, strong family values, and characters that felt real and relatable. From the very beginning, Melissa Sue Anderson stood out among the young cast members. She brought a calm presence and emotional depth to Mary Ingalls that felt natural and believable. Viewers connected with her gentle personality and quiet strength. Over time, Mary became one of the central emotional figures of the series. Many of the show's most memorable storylines revolved around her struggles and growth. One of the most powerful arcs came when Mary gradually lost her sight, a storyline that demanded great emotional skill from a young actress. Melissa handled the challenge with remarkable maturity, delivering performances that were praised by critics and loved by audiences. In fact, her portrayal was so powerful that it earned her a nomination for a prestigious television award. For a young performer, it was an extraordinary achievement. As the seasons continued, Melissa spent nearly a decade growing up on the set of the show. Day after day, she worked alongside experienced actors and developed a reputation for being disciplined, focused, and serious about her craft. Crew members often remembered how professional she was. Even as a teenager, she studied her scripts carefully and prepared deeply for every scene. Unlike some young performers who enjoyed the spotlight and attention, Melissa was naturally reserved. She preferred to focus on the work rather than fame. This quiet dedication helped her bring authenticity to Mary Ingalls, a character who often faced difficult and emotional challenges. But as the show continued into the late 1970s and early 1980s, things slowly began to change. Like many long-running television series, Little House on the Prairie started expanding its cast and storylines in order to keep the narrative fresh. New families were introduced, younger characters became more important, and the focus of the show gradually shifted. While this helped the series continue for many seasons, it also meant that some original characters received less attention than before. For Melissa Sue Anderson, this change created a moment of reflection. She had dedicated much of her childhood and teenage years to playing Mary Ingalls. She had given the role her full commitment and had carried some of the show's most emotional stories. Yet as the scripts evolved, Mary's role was no longer as central as it once had been. Scenes became fewer, and the character's journey seemed to reach a natural conclusion. For an actress who cared deeply about meaningful storytelling, this raised an important question about the future. Should she continue a role that no longer challenged her in the same way, or should she move forward and explore new opportunities? At the time, fans watching the show had no idea that such thoughts were quietly forming behind the scenes. To them, Mary Ingalls remained an essential part of the world of Walnut Grove. But for Melissa Sue Anderson, the years of dedication and emotional work were slowly leading her toward a decision that would eventually surprise audiences across the country. It was not a decision driven by drama or conflict. Instead, it came from a thoughtful understanding of her career, her growth as an actress, and her desire to continue developing beyond the role that had made her famous. Before Melissa Sue Anderson ever stepped onto the famous Prairie set, her journey as a performer had already begun quietly. She was born in 1962 in Berkeley, California, and from a young age she showed signs of being thoughtful and observant. Unlike many children who love being the center of attention, Melissa had a calm and somewhat reserved personality. She watched people carefully, listened closely, and spoke only when she felt she had something meaningful to say. Her parents noticed these qualities early. When the family later moved closer to Los Angeles, new opportunities appeared that would eventually guide Melissa toward acting. At first, the idea of performing was simply an experiment. Like many young children living near the entertainment industry, Melissa began appearing in commercials. These small roles helped her become comfortable in front of cameras and gave casting directors their first glimpse of her natural ability. Even at a young age, she had something that many performers struggle to develop: emotional honesty. She did not exaggerate her expressions or push too hard to impress. Instead, she delivered lines simply and truthfully, which made her performances feel real. Because of this, casting directors soon began inviting her to audition for television roles. During the early 1970s, she appeared in several guest roles on popular shows, gradually building experience and confidence. Each new opportunity taught her more about the craft of acting and the discipline required to succeed in the industry. It was during this period that her name eventually appeared on the casting list for a new television project that would change her life forever. That project was Little House on the Prairie. The series was based on the well-known books by Mary Ingalls Wilder and aimed to bring the life of a frontier family to television audiences. The producers were searching for young actors who could bring warmth, sincerity, and emotional depth to the Ingalls family. Among those guiding the project was Michael Landon, who served not only as the lead actor playing Charles Ingalls, but also as a creative force behind the show. When Melissa came in to audition for the role of Mary Ingalls, something special happened. Those in the room later described how her performance carried a quiet strength that felt perfect for the character. Mary was meant to be thoughtful, responsible, and emotionally mature compared to her younger sister Laura. Melissa's natural personality fit the role almost perfectly. She did not need to pretend to be calm or serious. She simply brought her own qualities into performance. After the audition process ended, the producers made their decision, and Melissa Sue Anderson officially became Mary Ingalls. Filming began in 1974, and from the first episodes, viewers could see that the young actress brought something unique to the series. The dynamic between Mary and Laura, played by Melissa Gilbert, quickly became one of the most beloved parts of the show. Laura was energetic, curious, and sometimes impulsive, while Mary was thoughtful and steady. This contrast created a natural balance that helped make the Ingalls family feel believable and relatable. Behind the scenes, Melissa approached her work with the same discipline she had shown during her early acting experiences. She studied each script carefully and tried to understand not only what Mary said, but also what the character felt. Crew members noticed that she often prepared quietly before scenes, reading her lines and focusing deeply on the emotion she needed to express. This dedication impressed the adults working on the show, especially Michael Landon, who valued actors that took their responsibilities seriously. As the first seasons of the series aired, the popularity of the show grew rapidly. Families across America gathered each week to watch the adventures and struggles of the Ingalls family. For Melissa Sue Anderson, the role of Mary Ingalls was quickly becoming more than just another acting job. It was shaping her career, her public identity, and her daily life as a young performer growing up in front of millions of viewers. And although no one realized it at the time, the role would eventually become both her greatest success and the reason she would one day decide it was time to move forward as the popularity of Little House on the Prairie continued to grow during the mid-1970s. The character of Mary Ingalls became increasingly important to the emotional heart of the series. Audiences connected strongly with her gentle nature, her sense of responsibility, and the calm maturity she showed as the older sister in the Ingalls family. Week after week, viewers watched Mary help her parents, guide her younger siblings, and face the small challenges of frontier life with patience and kindness. The role allowed Melissa Sue Anderson to show a wide range of emotions, even though she was still very young. She had to portray joy, sadness, worry, and hope in ways that felt believable to millions of viewers. As the show moved into later seasons, the writers began giving Mary more serious storylines. One of the most powerful and unforgettable arcs came when the character gradually lost her eyesight. This storyline, which began in the mid-1970s, was one of the most emotionally demanding plots ever given to a teenage actress on television at that time. The writers and producers trusted Melissa's ability to handle the challenge because they had already seen how deeply she committed to every scene. To prepare for the role, Melissa spent time learning about how people who were blind experienced the world. She studied their movements, their ways of listening carefully to sounds, and the patience they needed to navigate everyday life. Instead of exaggerating the character's struggles, she tried to show the emotional truth of Mary's situation. The result was a series of performances that many viewers still remember decades later. When Mary first realized she was losing her vision, the scenes were filled with quiet fear and confusion. Later episodes showed her learning to adapt, finding strength in difficult circumstances, and building a new life despite the loss of sight. The emotional depth of these moments impressed critics and audiences alike. In fact, Melissa Sue Anderson's performance earned her a nomination for a major television award, a remarkable achievement for a young actress. While all of this was happening on screen, life behind the scenes was also shaping Melissa's experience. She spent long hours on the set working closely with experienced actors and crew members. Among them was Michael Landon, who not only acted in the show, but also wrote and directed many episodes. Landon was known for expecting dedication and professionalism from his cast, and Melissa met those expectations with determination. He trusted her with some of the most emotional scenes in the series because he knew she would approach them with sincerity. Another important part of the show's success was a strong relationship between Mary and her younger sister Laura, played by Melissa Gilbert. Their on-screen bond helped audiences feel connected to the Ingalls family as a whole. Laura was adventurous and sometimes rebellious, while Mary often represented calm understanding and thoughtful guidance. Together, the two characters created moments that felt authentic to viewers who recognized the familiar dynamics of family life. As the seasons passed, Mary's story continued to evolve. She eventually met Adam Kendall, a teacher who was also blind, and their relationship became one of the show's most touching storylines. Their love story showed viewers that Mary's life could still be filled with happiness, purpose, and independence despite the challenges she faced. The episodes surrounding their relationship, marriage, and shared work helping other blind students added even more emotional layers to the character. By the late 1970s, Mary Ingalls had become one of the most respected characters on the show. Her resilience, kindness, and determination inspired viewers and added depth to the series. Yet while audiences saw Mary's strength on the screen, they did not always realize how demanding these dramatic storylines were for the young actress portraying her. Each episode required Melissa to explore difficult emotions and deliver performances that felt genuine and heartfelt. Over time, this responsibility became a defining part of her career, shaping both her growth as an actress and the direction her future would eventually take. By the end of the 1970s, Melissa Sue Anderson had already spent many years playing Mary Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie. What had started as a role for a young girl had slowly become a central part of her life. She had grown up on the set, spending long days filming scenes and working closely with the cast and crew. For viewers, Mary Ingalls was a symbol of resilience and quiet strength. They had watched her face illness, blindness, heartbreak, and eventually love and marriage. Each of these storylines required deep emotional performances, and Melissa delivered them with remarkable maturity. However, as the series moved into the early 1980s, the show itself began to change. Long-running television programs often evolve in order to keep audiences interested, and this series was no different. The writers started introducing new characters, new families, and new conflicts that expanded the world of Walnut Grove. While this helped the show remain fresh for viewers, it also meant that the original characters were no longer always at the center of the story. Mary Ingalls, who had once carried many of the most dramatic arcs, began appearing less frequently in episodes. The shift was gradual, but it was noticeable. Scripts that once focused heavily on Mary's experiences now focus on younger characters and new families in town. Behind the scenes, this was simply part of the natural evolution of a long-running television series. But for Melissa, it created a moment of quiet reflection about her future. She had devoted nearly 8 years of her life to the role. During that time, she had developed her acting skills, gained recognition from critics, and built strong relationships with her co-stars. Working alongside actors like Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura Ingalls, had created a sense of family on set. Many members of the cast shared meals, rehearsed together, and spent countless hours building the world of the show. The guidance of Michael Landon also played a significant role in shaping Melissa's career. Landon had trusted her with emotionally complex storylines and expected professionalism from everyone involved in production. Yet despite the warm environment and the success of the show, Melissa began to notice that Mary's journey had reached a point where there were fewer meaningful stories left to tell. Her character had already experienced some of the most dramatic moments imaginable. She had lost her sight, found love with Adam Kendall, married, and built a life helping students at a school for the blind. These events gave Mary a complete and powerful narrative arc. As the writers focused more on newer characters, Melissa faced an important question. Should she continue playing a role that no longer offered the same depth or opportunity for growth? For an actress who cared deeply about the quality of her work, this question was not easy to ignore. At the same time, she was no longer the young child who had first joined the show. She was growing into adulthood and beginning to think about the broader possibilities of her career. Many actors who start working at a young age eventually reach a point where they want to explore different kinds of roles and experiences. Melissa felt that same curiosity about what might come next. The decision she was slowly approaching was not based on anger or conflict. There were no dramatic disagreements with the producers or the cast. Instead, it was a thoughtful realization that her character's journey might have reached its natural conclusion. For fans watching the series, everything still seemed peaceful in the world of Walnut Grove. But quietly, behind the scenes, Melissa Sue Anderson was beginning to consider a step that would surprise audiences everywhere. She was starting to think about the possibility of leaving the role that had defined her childhood and moving forward into the next stage of her life and career. By the early 1980s, the success of Little House on the Prairie had already made it one of the most beloved family dramas on American television. Millions of viewers watched the series every week, and the characters of Walnut Grove had become familiar members of many households. Among those characters, Mary Ingalls remained one of the most respected and emotionally powerful figures in the story. For years, Melissa Sue Anderson had carried the responsibility of portraying Mary with sincerity and emotional depth. However, as the show expanded with new storylines and additional cast members, the role of Mary slowly began to shift. The writers were focusing more attention on younger characters and newly introduced families in order to keep the narrative evolving. While this creative decision helped the show remain interesting for longtime viewers, it also meant that Mary's presence in the story became less central than before. Instead of appearing in many scenes throughout each episode, her character began to appear more occasionally. For Melissa, this change was subtle at first, but gradually became clear as she read the scripts each season. There were fewer dramatic arcs built around Mary, and the character's journey seemed to have reached a natural point of completion. By this time, Mary had already experienced many of the most significant events that could shape a character's life. She had faced the tragedy of losing her eyesight, learned to rebuild her independence, discovered love with Adam Kendall, and married in one of the series' most memorable episodes. Together, they had devoted themselves to helping students at a school for the blind, creating a powerful message about resilience and compassion. Because of these developments, Mary's story had already delivered some of the show's most meaningful lessons. Continuing to extend the character's narrative without clear direction could risk repeating ideas that had already been explored. Melissa understood this reality and began to think seriously about her future. She had spent nearly a decade portraying Mary Ingalls, which meant that most of her childhood and teenage years had been connected to the series. The experience had given her professional recognition and valuable acting skills, but had also limited her ability to explore different types of roles. Like many actors who grow up on long-running shows, she started wondering what other opportunities might exist beyond the world of Walnut Grove. At the same time, she remained grateful for everything the show had given her. She respected the guidance of Michael Landon and appreciated the friendship she had built with her fellow cast members, including Melissa Gilbert. The environment on set had always been professional and supportive, and Melissa often spoke positively about the experience in later interviews. For this reason, her thoughts about leaving were not driven by conflict or disappointment. Instead, they came from a personal desire to continue growing as an actress. She believed that meaningful performances required strong storytelling and clear character development. If a role no longer offered those elements, continuing to play it might prevent her from discovering new creative challenges. This perspective eventually led her to a quiet but important decision. In 1981, after years of dedication to the series, Melissa Sue Anderson chose not to return as a full-time cast member. The choice surprised many fans because Mary Ingalls had been such a significant part of the show's history. However, Melissa felt that the character's story had reached its natural ending. She believed that stepping away would allow her both personal and professional growth. Her departure marked the closing of an important chapter, not only for her, but also for the series itself. Although Mary would still appear in a few later episodes, the era when she served as one of the central emotional figures of the show had come to an end. For Melissa Sue Anderson, the decision represented a moment of courage and self-understanding, a step toward discovering what her life and career could become beyond the role that had made her famous. When Melissa Sue Anderson decided to step away from her regular role on Little House on the Prairie in 1981, the news surprised many loyal viewers. For nearly a decade, audiences had watched her grow from a young girl into a young woman, while portraying Mary Ingalls. Her character had become one of the emotional foundations of the series, representing strength, patience, and resilience during difficult times. Because of this strong connection, many fans wondered if there had been some kind of dramatic disagreement behind the scenes that caused her departure. However, the reality was much simpler and far more thoughtful. Melissa later explained that her decision was based on her belief that Mary's story had already reached its natural ending. The character had experienced some of the most important events in life: education, love, marriage, and personal challenges, and there were fewer meaningful directions left for the writers to explore. Continuing to appear regularly in the series without strong storylines would not have allowed her to grow as an actress. Melissa believed that if she could not bring new emotional depth or development to the role, it would be better to move forward rather than stay only because the show was successful. This approach reflected the same professionalism she had shown throughout her years on the program. Instead of making a sudden or emotional decision, she carefully considered what would be best for her career and personal growth. Her respect for the series and the people who worked on it remained strong. She often spoke with appreciation about Michael Landon, who had been both a mentor and a creative leader during her time on the show. Landon's dedication to storytelling and his ability to guide young actors had helped shape Melissa's understanding of the craft. The friendships she built with her fellow cast members were also important memories she carried with her after leaving the series. Her on-screen sister, played by Melissa Gilbert, had shared many years of work and experiences with her. Together, they had created moments that viewers remembered long after the episodes aired. Leaving that environment was not easy, because the set had become like a second home. The cast and crew spent long days working together, often forming close bonds that felt like family relationships. Walking away from such a place required confidence and courage. Yet Melissa believed that growth sometimes requires stepping into the unknown. After leaving her regular role, she began exploring new acting opportunities. She appeared in television movies and different kinds of dramatic productions that allowed her to show other sides of her talent. One of her notable film appearances was in the thriller Happy Birthday to Me, which gave her a chance to perform in a completely different genre from the family drama she had become known for. She also made guest appearances on various television programs, gradually building a more diverse career as an adult actress. Although these projects were different from the world of Walnut Grove, they allowed Melissa to expand her experience and demonstrate that she could succeed beyond the role of Mary Ingalls. For many actors who become famous as children, the transition to adult roles can be difficult. Audiences often remember them only for the characters they played when they were young. Melissa understood this challenge and approached her career with patience and thoughtful choices. Instead of rushing into many projects, she selected roles carefully, focusing on quality rather than quantity. Her goal was not simply to remain in the spotlight, but to continue developing as a performer. Through these decisions, she showed the same quiet determination that had defined her years on Little House on the Prairie. Leaving the show was not the end of her journey. It was the beginning of a new chapter that allowed her to explore both her professional ambitions and her personal life beyond the character that had made her famous.